call the Audit Committee meeting to order. Approval of minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Mark, unfinished business.
Okay, on the first item we have is the new business. We're going to a little bit different than what you probably printed off. It's going to be the audit of the Metro Water Services Fire Hydrant Inspection, Repair, and Maintenance. And we have Innocent Darby to give a debrief on this real quick.
Thank you, Mark. I present to you the audit of the Metro Water Service Fire Hydrant Inspection, Flow Testing, and Maintenance process. Here from the Water Services Department is the Director, Mr. Potter, who will be available to answer any questions that you may have. The audit was requested by Mr. Potter, and we had three main objectives. The most defined objective is public and private hydrants inspected in accordance with Metro and industry standards. The other two, whether inspection fees for private hydrants are recorded and collected, and also whether data between the Geographical Information System, the Mobile Workforce Management, and the Hansen Asset Management System are consistent. The scope of the audit was all hydrants in service, public hydrants in service through March 2018, and all private hydrants in service as of the fall of 2017. There were 20,880 public hydrants in service as of March 2018, and 3,127 private hydrants as of fall 2017. The main observations we got from the audit was that out of the 20,880 public hydrants, 17% or 3,477 were not inspected and flow tested within the 5 years required by industry standards. Now, to say a little bit about that, there is industry standard that if there is a hydrant that is not in service but has about another hydrant 500 feet away that is in service, that should be good enough. And secondly, I tested 3 of the 3,477, which means I went there with Metro staff to do a flow test, and they all met the industry standards. So that does not mean that because they were not inspected or flow tested, they are not ready for fire flow. Private hydrants were regularly inspected, but the procedures to follow up on those hydrants that failed inspection were not completely followed. We came up with 10 recommendations, all of which were accepted. A noted recommendation is for the Water Services Department to work together with the Fire Service Department, train them so they will be able to actually do the inspection and follow-up of the private hydrants. Currently, that is being done by the private company. I yield for any questions.
What's being done by a private company?
The testing, inspection of private hydrants.
Okay.
So we do have public and private hydrants, yes.
Can I?
Oh, please.
Okay. I just want to get clarity on the role of fire versus water in this process. And is it common to have those duties split like that across organizations, or
Well,
is that normal? Or?
As far as my understanding of the code, the Water Services is responsible for the inspection, and maintenance of the hydrants. And they do that in conjunction with the fire department, because the fire department is the, if we can call them, customers for using the hydrants. They go out there to use the hydrants. So fire's just in support of the work of water? Yeah, we can say that, but I mean, they are also supposed to be part of the process. So if they go out there and they see hydrants that are not fully functional, they are supposed to report to the Water Service Department.
Okay. That's not been happening.
Sorry?
That's not been happening.
Well, not during the audit period that we looked at, yes. There was a verbal agreement which was not being followed according to what we invested. So,
you have some kind of an MOU in place?
No.
Okay.
It was more like it was verbal, but that's why I gave the recommendation that they should put in place a verifiable agreement between the two departments.
And I appreciate Director Potter asking for all of this, because am I correct in basically assuming that the inspection fee revenue, the recommendation, that would go to the fire department, and the fire department replaces the private contractor doing the inspection?
Yes.
And who's currently getting this fee revenue for the inspection fee revenue? Is that
TKO is the company. It's a private company.
That's the contractor, but is it the Metro General Fund? Is it the Water Department? Who is collecting and getting the revenue currently?
Yeah, I think it goes to the Water Service Department. It's part of
you would be giving up your revenue stream to the fire department.
It's insufficient as it is, so we wouldn't be losing that much.
It's insufficient to pay for the cost of doing it? Okay, so you would be transferring both the revenue and the responsibility.
Well, we're discussing that with the fire department presently. We had our first meeting on this audit 20 November, so we're exploring what we're going to do specifically with private hydrants, because that's by code, we're supposed to do it. So the code had to be changed if we transferred it to fire, but we're exploring what the best process would be for private. I personally think it'd be better for the fire department to do it.
Since they're the customer, so to speak.
The customer of a private hydrant is a private entity.
But they're the people who got to connect to it and make sure it works.
And that's part of the problem, is some of these are behind fences and things like that. So it's difficult to get behind a fence on occasion.
Okay, and then there's been bad experience?
No, it's private property, so on occasion we can't get access to it.
Okay. So it's more than just is there the right water pressure in the hydrant. It's can you get to it, and can the fire department connect to it?
That's part of
the whole.
Yeah, on the private side.
On the private side, okay. And the fire department would be better at working with the private actors than you guys.
I think so. I mean, we need to work together, but I think getting a sufficient fee to cover the cost of the inspection and the follow-up, with the fire department getting the revenue and the fire department doing it, they have a vested interest in doing it.
And we're empowered to change the code to produce the appropriate fee to pay for the cost of this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Is the 17% non-inspection, is that consistent from year to year? Is that about what is not inspected?
No, we didn't do these from year to year. We just took all the hydrants in service as of a particular date, which was as of March 2018. So we didn't do anything like, okay, as of February or March last year, how many hydrants were there?
And if 17% were not inspected, right? Tell me again, what happens after that? Does somebody go back and inspect them when you figured out that 17% were not inspected?
That's what we expect the Water Services Department to do.
I can address that. We're about 310 days behind. That's the summary. So we're going to get, on March 1st, we're going to get a contractor on board to do about a 3-month catch-up period. We're going to keep steady state on what we've got right now. We've hired more people. They'll be exclusively assigned to fire hydrant testing. So we're going to keep current until March, get a contractor on board, get us caught up, and then we'll reduce that 310-day window to 0, and we'll maintain 5 years.
So when a fire hydrant is inspected, you're inspecting for the ability for it to pour water out, I assume. I mean, so you're looking for cracks and other things as well?
The inspection is visual and to make sure it works. Part of a flow test is to identify what the flow rate of a hydrant is.
Yeah.
So if you drive around town, you'll see different color caps, orange and green and black. So the flow rate determines the color of the cap, so the fire department knows how much flow is available. But it also helps us calibrate our distribution model. So it's in our interest to get good flow data for that reason as well. So there's several reasons why we do it, and we're 310 days behind about. We need to catch up.
Well, I guess my last question is just to make sure that, what type of risk is involved with not checking different fire? Are they basically the ones that, I just want to make sure that they're safe and that they're actually, they're functioning. So we know that 17% haven't been checked, but are we pretty confident that they're okay? They just haven't been checked?
I am fully confident because since I've been here, I can't recall a fire hydrant failure when the fire department showed up.
Okay.
We're researching that to find out exactly when the last one was. But I talked to the fire marshal. He can't remember one. His fire suppression people can't remember one. But that's our goal, is a 0 failure rate. And I think to date we've had that. But I'm fully confident that when you roll up on a fire hydrant, it's going to work. Number one, it's really hard to break a fire hydrant because all you're doing when you're rotating it, you're pushing a spring down. So the operating part is a nut with a spring. So they don't just spontaneously break. So the inspection is for flow verification and to make sure you have access to it and it's not overgrown by weeds and things like that.
Right, okay.
But we need to get current on the 5 years.
I've never tried to break a fire hydrant.
If you run into it, in Hollywood, usually they don't spray up in the air like that.
I'll try to refrain from trying to harm them.
What's the life cycle of a hydrant?
We probably have hydrants that have been in place for, I'd say, 30 and greater years. They just sit there. There's nothing. It's really hard to break them. They just sit there and look, painted.
Any other questions?
The next item on the agenda, we're going to investigation reports that were issued since the last audit committee meeting. And the first one was dealing with Collier Engineering, where we got a request from Mayor Briley to investigate potential conflicts of interest and standard of conduct issues and some use of services with the Collier contract. So you got a copy of the report. If you have any questions, we have a whole host of people here to help clarify any issues that you have.
Can you introduce everyone?
Can I introduce everyone? I know Saul. I guess we have Saul Solomon.
Solomon. I represent Collier. I used to hang around these places until Talia kicked me out. This is Chad Collier, the CEO of Collier Engineering. And if we could make a statement at some point in time, we'd appreciate it.
Anybody have an objection?
I do.
Okay.
I'm not sure why this is between us and the auditor. This isn't part of the investigation. The report says what it says. I'm open to what other people think, but maybe when we're done asking our questions, but I'm not sure why they get the platform.
Okay. Questions about the report?
Mr. Chair, I've got a lot, and I'm happy to go first or last or whatever. All right, Mr. Swan, did you make any referrals to the comptroller of law enforcement over this?
No.
Okay, allegation A, which is pages 8 to 12 of the report, that's one where the conclusion was that there was the appearance of impropriety, but couldn't substantiate that there was any impropriety. And my question is around the standard of proof, preponderance. It strikes me that the report indicates indicates clearly that the dramatic increase in business coincided with the entertainment that's been cataloged, that the various witnesses involved tell conflicting stories that don't match up. And in fact, this is the only finding where the witnesses were unable to tell the same story. My view would be that common sense indicates that a dramatic increase in spending at the same time as the witnesses not being able to tell the same story indicates a probable quid pro quo. And at least from my legal experience, that would indicate that that's a preponderance of the evidence. The report reads to me like you were requiring a smoking gun to find substantiation. And so I'm just curious, there wasn't enough details in the report for me to tell what exactly you were balancing to find that it didn't meet the standard of preponderance.
Well, you're combining in the sense that the individuals were on, some of the individuals that were listed for the conflict of interest were on the review board for the initial contract, which was a period before when the contract was issued, and then making recommendations to increase the dollar amount from $20 million. The big contract was from $20 million to add another $15 million, and that went through the normal approval process in the sense that finance purchasing department, the procurement officer is the one who approved the increase in the amount from the recommendation from Public Works. So we didn't see anybody directly related to the entertainment involved in the approval process to say that how was the award being done. So that's how our viewpoint from that.
Mr. Chair, for several of these allegations, I'm going to make motions asking for the audit staff to supplement the report, and I'm going to do them as I go through the allegations. For this allegation A, there's two motions I'd like to make. The first one would be to ask the audit staff to supplement the report to specifically lay out the analysis of the circumstantial evidence that was collected compared to the preponderance of evidence standard.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure, it's on video, but it's to ask the audit staff to supplement the report to specifically lay out the analysis of the circumstantial evidence that was collected compared to the preponderance of evidence standard.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
The second motion on this allegation A that I'd like to make would be to ask the audit staff to add a recommendation that all involved personnel be reassigned to different duties in order to address the appearance of preferential treatment.
Is that permanent? Permanent reassignment or temporary?
Let me restate that.
Yes.
To ask audit staff to add a recommendation that all involved personnel would be reassigned so they didn't work on Colliers-related matters in order to address the appearance of preferential treatment.
Second.
Any discussion?
In the recommendation, then procurement, there would be solicited a response to the recommendation, or simply
It would just be a recommendation,
just
as
a
I understand
recommendation.
it.
A recommendation that the employees identified in this report are not involved in anything moving forward. Is that
With Colliers.
with Colliers?
Yep.
I think that's where you are. Okay.
Mark, do you have any comments on any of these?
No, that's,
Okay, if you do, I mean,
no, good.
The only question that I have is, are there any, I think we need to be careful to make sure that the employees, I know they have rights, if you will, but there's some due diligence required. I'll look at the lawyer for this, that you can't, I don't know exactly how you want to deal with that.
Reassignment, it certainly would be, could be considered discipline, and then
Not the recommendation.
the recommendation itself would not. That's correct. It would be more the implementation of the recommendation.
That's why I chose it to ask, not direct it to the department, but to direct it to the audit staff for a recommendation in the report.
and the reason I was even asking Mark is going from a recommendation, does he agree with the recommendation, or is it a consideration of a recommendation? As our report.
This one, I intended the motion to be to ask the audit staff to add the recommendation. And if Mr. Swan felt strongly, I guess he would explain himself.
Yes.
But that would be the audit committee speaking, saying we're asking audit staff to add that recommendation.
Well, and our current recommendation is that for all those parties involved to take appropriate administrative actions to cure the appearance of preferential treatment being given to contractors.
Well, and I mean, frankly, that's, to my way of thinking, too anemic, and doesn't indicate what ought to happen to address it.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On allegation B, which is on page 12, the detailed discussion is on pages 12 to 14 of the full report. That's the one that concluded that the services provided can be considered, quote unquote, related to the contract. At this point, I've pulled the detailed scope of services from the paving contract. And I can't figure out how to connect the dots about what services addressed in allegation B can, quote, can be considered related to. And so, and the report doesn't describe that. So my motion on that one would be to ask the audit staff to supplement the report to point out which specific language in the written scope of services for the contract with Colliers, quote, can be considered, end quote, related to the work that was done.
Everybody hear that? Can you repeat that? Make sure.
Sure. Well, let me give some background. The allegation B discussed at pages 12 and 14 talks about the fact that the allegation was that projects were being given to Colliers outside the scope of contracts when other vendors are on the contract for the same services. And after a page or so of facts, it basically says, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it basically is clear that the complaint about projects are not specifically identified in a scope of services, but are deemed related to the scope of services in the Colliers contract. And the way the Colliers contract is written, they're allowed to perform work on specific service A, specific service B, specific service C, and work related to A, B, and C. And since it's being specifically relied upon that this is related to work, I would like the dots connected of, I've got the task details. It's a couple pages of stuff, and so the work complained about isn't listed specifically here, but it's theoretically related to this. The motion is to have the report supplemented to connect the dots of which of these several pages of task details the complaint about work was related to.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
And then moving on to H, which is a mistake about the sidewalk work. That's pages 18 and 19 in the full report. In this, if I'm not mistaken, I read the report to say mistakes were definitely made. Audit staff found the mistakes, not the parties involved, but that a remedy was created before the report was issued. I think I got that right.
Well, I wouldn't say that. We found that it was already in existence. There was an issue of the rework being needed, and then we followed up on how the rework was
So you
being
didn't find
processed. We didn't find the rework. It was existed. And
Bear with me a
it was
second.
an issue. It was brought to our attention from an anonymous source.
Okay, so so I'll go with that. So mistakes were made, an anonymous source told audit staff about it midway through, and what you found was that a remedy was created after you became aware of it?
We requested Public Works to see how it was going to be addressed. Public Works informed us that they would be crediting, the Collier would be crediting their account for the rework that we invoiced for.
So, and then the finding was not substantiated in a situation where the parties did not formally bring it to audit's attention. An anonymous source brought it to audit's attention. And so my motion for the committee to consider is to ask audit staff to consider clarifying its report to indicate that the alleged activity did occur and therefore is substantiated but was subsequently remedied. So this would ask Mr. Swan to consider changing it from not substantiated or unsubstantiated to substantiated because there was an anonymous source that brought it to his attention, not the parties.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Swan on that one.
Well, I mean, our look was, the allegation was that the Metro government was absorbing those costs. And what we, from our discovery, was that Metro government was not going to be absorbing the costs.
Due to a remedy that you suggested?
The timing of when, no, we got, Public Works came back and said that they were working with Collier to get that taken care of.
Can I follow up?
But we can do some more work
So
with it.
you're saying that this remedy would have been in place if you had never gone in and done an audit?
I cannot speak of what might have happened.
I mean, and that's the reason why I would think it should be substantiated but remedied, not unsubstantiated.
Just very.
Well, you had there was an anonymous source that said there was a problem. You took that anonymous source and then did research on that particular source and then substantiated that there was a problem.
Well, the allegation was that Metro was was absorbing that cost, and there was no credits for it, and adjustments to the buildings. In fact, I don't know if it's been processed yet, but the goal was to have credits adjusted for those particular reworks.
Well, were the credits there before the
Before.
anonymous source or not?
Before the work or not?
We could put a timeline on that and adjust the report to
Because
his needs.
that's what the difference is.
But ultimately, the credits have been applied or are going to be applied.
Can I say something? It's not unusual in construction for there to be errors. Sometimes they're discovered immediately, sometimes they're not. But we have fairly routine processes for catching those and correcting those, and that's what is happening here.
Can you repeat your motion so we can get a second?
Yeah, I might change it a little bit to move to ask audit staff to clarify the report by giving us a specific timeline about the underlying activities as well as when audit became aware and pursued the issue with Public Works.
Okay. Yeah.
Any further discussion or clarification? All in favor?
And I think I've got one more. On this same allegation H, again, on the work was done under a paving contract, as I understand it. Is that right for this one, or no?
It's an engineering and inspection and construction engineering and inspection and pavement analysis, pavement management support, and related services to paving office.
All right, so my motion on this one is to ask audit staff to supplement the report to point out the specific language in the written scope of services of how this complaint about project fit in the scope of services.
Second?
Understand? Any other discussion? All in favor?
That was the last motion, and then just a question. I know there's a couple recommendations at the end of the thing. Is there a written corrective action plan that's been
We have
submitted to us?
requested one.
All right. I would like to, I guess I'll move. I said it was going to be the last motion, but it's not. I'd like to move to ask audit staff to ask Public Works for a written corrective action plan.
Second.
Discussion?
So, it's been a long time since I was on this committee, but is that something that you have to ask in your report, or is that sort of?
Well, we have, this is an investigation report, different from an audit report. And so our investigation reports, we don't send out drafts and have them vetted out normally. So it's kind of hard to ask to get a response for our recommendations. And there's just kind of added on as, for your consideration, since it's an investigation report. But you'll see later in the agenda where we did go back out and ask for a corrective action plan for the mayor's security detail recommendations and got a corrective action plan back. And it's not been our norm to do so, but we can start making our norm, issue the report, and then ask for a corrective action plan or acceptance or rejection of those recommendations.
I think that should be a norm for an investigation.
Yeah, I think the concern would be, I understand you're talking about two types of different reports, but at the end of the investigation, when you have done your report, what happens? Yeah, I know certain things can happen, but doesn't it make sense to always ask for a corrective action plan?
We will going forward. It's just not been our protocol in the past because we haven't done that many investigations.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any other questions from the other members of the committee?
Just clarification. Much of this work was from a formal request by the mayor on May 7th, and that is separate from the whistleblower complaint that we've been talking about. And
that's just one allegation, allegation each. Yeah.
So this really is the fruit of two separate sources. One is the mayor's office, and the other is a whistleblower. Okay, just wanted to be clear about that.
Can I say something on that?
Yes. Go ahead.
There was an anonymous source who made an allegation, who went to visit the mayor, and the mayor passed that on to Metro Audit to take a look at. We believe, for what it's worth, that the sources are the same. We don't know that for sure, but we know that there were anonymous sources made, that the mayor received anonymous sources as well. And same attorneys, basically, are the ones making the allegations.
Okay.
Just because they're here, I'd like to.
I will go on the record saying that I called Inspector Swan to express a concern around Mission Creek on the paving contract. So I also called, that's not been expressed. I mean, I think it's important with the assertion made there to clarify that so that there's not a conflation. I think I, like Councilman Mendez, had looked at the existing contracts and had some concern about the related similarly. So I think that's important to be on the record. So I can't speak to the other anonymous source, but I also called Mr. Swan's office to express concern about that contract.
Okay. Any other questions about the report?
Just because they're here, I think I'd like to just hear briefly from each department head, 1 minute, if you can just address the report with the committee, Parks, Water Services, and Public Works. I'd like just a minute from each of you.
Okay, I'll go first. We had an employee, Ricky Swift, who was involved, and he's been an employee since July 1 of 2004. This is the first indication of any kind of error in judgment he's ever displayed. I trust him completely. He understands the serious error in judgment that he did, and he's expressed remorse. What we've done internal in Metro Water Services is anybody who has the ability to influence any purchasing activity or any kind of participation on any kind of a selection committee. They've reread the ethics policy and have indicated as such to their assistant director and then to me. And then the final thing we're going to do as a training issue is to have Metro Legal come by and train this first and second and generally third layer of leadership in Metro Water Services about the ethics policy to make sure everybody understands.
Let me go to Metro Parks and Recreation. Our department as well had one employee who was involved. He is a long-term employee with Metro Parks and in a leadership role. He is on the leadership senior staff. I do trust him internally to address this matter. I had a counseling session with him and documented it to his personnel file. Of course, he signed it, documenting that he did receive the session. Additionally, we consulted with Metro Legal, who came over and did a training session on the ethics policy and standards of conduct. I also distributed the policy to all employees and advised that they become familiar with it, and we will continue to routinely do training on those policies.
Okay, I'm Mark Sturdivant. I'm the Director of Public Works Department. And there's a few things I'd like to report on. One is that even though the audit found that there was only the appearance of preferential treatment, when we looked at that, we know that the impact of it can be the same as an actual conflict. So we took this very seriously, and I've met with all 5 of the employees at Public Works more than once, and they made a serious error in judgment. They didn't think through clearly the impact of attending these events, the appearance that could create. I want you to know, though, that they're good people, good employees. They understand the mistake that they made, and I'm confident that they won't do it again. We've already started an ethics training program at Public Works. We've had 51 people attend the sessions so far. Most of those are division managers or department managers, and our goal is to have every employee at Public Works go through the training. So I feel that we have addressed the employee issue, but during the course of the investigation, we also did some internal review of what we were doing. We recognized that there could be some confusion or misunderstanding on the way some of our processes occur, and so we've been working closely with the procurement department and the mayor. We've met several times with the mayor's office, and there are 4 changes to our policies and procedures that we intend to make and support the mayor on his recommendations. So I'd like to go through those 4 briefly if I could. The first one is a pretty significant occurrence, and that is that we are going to stop or halt the current procurements, RFPs that we have for design and engineering services related to sidewalks, capital projects, and paving. We feel that we have to have an open and arm's length above board process, and with this audit being undertaken, it's difficult for us to run a procurement, and we've also had requests for information from the media, which also make it very awkward and difficult to run a procurement. So we're going to stop the current procurements that we have, and we had a few that were going to come up in the next couple of months, and we're going to halt those also. Before we resume procurement, we're going to look at how we scope work, how we score work, and make sure that it's a level playing field, that we don't unnecessarily favor firms that are already working for Metro or have worked for us in the past. And we think that by doing that, we'll have a much better response from the firms in Nashville and the surrounding area. We'll get bigger field, hopefully better competition in our RFPs. That's the second thing. The third thing is that on contracts that require an increase, we think that when the increase is more than 20%, we should just go ahead and do a formal amendment regardless of what the contract says on how you can change it. We think that's just kind of a good thing to do, and it provides more transparency and openness and notice for people that would be interested in that. And then finally, and this is something that we can't do on our own, but over time, we would like to consider the possibility of reducing Public Works reliance on private contractors. And to do that, we would need an increase in the number of employees that we have, engineers as well, and that would require an increase in our operating budget. And that's a decision we can't make. That's something we would have to work in conjunction with the mayor's office, and the finance department, and the city council. So those are the four recommendations that we've been working on with the mayor. We support him on those. These are things that are apart and separate from the audit recommendations.
Is there any other questions or comments from the committee?
Well, I have a question. Just sitting here thinking about it, that all the department heads, if worked with the acceptance of an inappropriate gift. But there's another part of this, which is the offering of an inappropriate gift. And I see procurement here. What are our rules? Because it takes two, and we shouldn't be doing business with anybody that is offering an inappropriate gift, so to speak. How do we navigate that space?
Well, the procurement code and the procurement regulations are clear about what kinds of remedies that the city has, that it can employ as it relates to this kind of thing, specifically ethics and contracting, that section of the code. There are no specific procurement regulations that are established by the Procurement Standards Board to kind of tighten up the code. And so there's an opportunity there for us. But the rules as it relates to debarment and suspension and what kinds of specific actions can be taken against a contractor are laid out, but they're limited to, the offense of a crime, a criminal offense, embezzlement, that kind of thing. But there's also some gray area, if you will, where there's some specific character issues that can be considered by the purchasing agent as a cause for suspension as well. And suspension would be up to 3 months, suspension up to 3 years. Debarment up to 3 years, suspension up to 3 months, the threes and the Ps.
So could I ask for you and legal to review the language so that there's protections to prevent contractors from inappropriately offering gifts? Again, Mark, that wasn't covered in the mayor's 4 points, was it?
No.
Okay. Because again, it takes somebody offering as well as somebody accepting. Yes, ma'am.
Also, I think that this is an opportunity also for our Procurement Standards Board to take some specific action related to our ethics and contracting law that's on the books now. In the past, there hasn't been any specificity around how we look at ethics beyond employees specifically, and I think this is an opportunity for us to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Jim.
Question for Mr. Sturdivant. So one of the points was about kind of stopping the process where we are now, taking a look at it, and then redoing it. So does that mean, is that in terms of the entire sidewalk project? Or what are we talking about?
We were in the process of issuing RFPs for contractors ongoing for the sidewalk process, and that's the ones we're going to halt. So the current contractor will have to extend until we can clear this up and resume the RFP process.
Okay, so you've got a current contractor that will be continuing on with its work.
In some form or another, we'll have to address that.
So what does that mean for the overall sidewalk project?
It shouldn't be affected.
Yeah, I guess my only question on, I think that I think we'd want to know, I think the council would want to know kind of where we are in that process as we go through. Obviously,
well,
you've got interested members here. You've got the council member Henderson, who's obviously heavily involved in this.
Well, we don't do the contracting, and there are some legal hoops to jump through there on how best to extend that, but we have contractors in place, and presumably we'll just keep everything in place so the program can keep operating.
I guess my request would be asking Public Works to keep the council members, particularly the audit members and Councilmember Henderson, in terms of the process, so they know exactly how this is proceeding.
Anybody else? Okay, and if anybody else had any other comments, just direct them to the Metro Auditor and the appropriate conduit. Okay?
I would just reiterate my request to make a statement. If I can't, that's fine. I would just like to say a few things.
Does the committee, or should we just direct them back through Mark? What's the pleasure of the committee?
I mean, it's not noticed as a public hearing. I would rather have them directed to Mr. Swan, but I'll defer to whatever the rest of the committee wants.
It's fine with me to hear it, so.
I'm fine with hearing it.
Okay, thank you. Just a few things. I was asked by Mr. Collier to step in once these allegations were made. I didn't know him, never met him before. And before I did so, I interviewed him, the people at the top of the organization. These are people who are diligent, they work hard, want to do the right thing, and like all of us, they make mistakes. Upon my recommendation, they took the following actions as soon as these allegations were made. They hired an independent auditor to review all their billing practices, to review all their bank accounts, make sure there's no funny-looking cash advances or cash withdrawals. And they opened it up. Every employee, all records were opened up to this independent auditor. All this was turned over to Metro Audit as well. They fully cooperated with the audit. They changed their policy concerning the suite. And most importantly was, before these allegations came out, they were told by their lawyer that entertaining Metro employees could be an issue. It's not spelled out specifically in the contract, but it clearly is not something they should have done. As soon as Mr. Collier learned of that, he scheduled training of all his employees. This was before the allegations were made. Some pretty horrible allegations were made. They go beyond an appearance of impropriety. They talk about basically bribery. They talk about all kinds of things that unethical practices, all of which were unsubstantiated because plaintiffs said they didn't have it. That being said, Mr. Collier is very aware of what the appearance of propriety looks like, and this is Exhibit A right here. And we'll do whatever it takes to help Metro and himself move forward in this. Basically, his relationship with Metro and Public Works is on very, very solid footing. There's no need for him to curry favor with Metro employees. And I would just reiterate the fact that they did what they should have done as soon as these allegations happened. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next item.
Since we took the comment. Mr. Solomon, in addition to providing the audit report to Mr. Swan, and so that's not accessible to anybody, are you guys willing to provide that publicly?
Sure. Yes.
I accept the comments you make about Collier's being good people and civically minded. I accept that, I do. But the problem with this is that it happens when we're in the middle of an extended streak of loss of confidence in the metropolitan government, and the appearance of impropriety is extraordinarily strong. Business tripled since the Berry administration started. business tripled since the Berry administration started. Reasonable people want to connect the dots about how is it that you triple your business in a couple of years. It's a big deal. And like in your law profession, when there's appearance of impropriety, even if it's just an appearance, one must bend over backwards to scrub the problem. And that's why I believe that the people involved in Metro who are involved with Colliers need to not be involved with Colliers, not go to a seminar. They need to not be involved with Colliers. And good people, civically minded people notwithstanding, given the current environment of a extended lack of confidence in the metropolitan government, I don't think there's any choice but for Metro to make a point of this isn't just no harm, no foul. It has to be addressed, and I do appreciate y'all coming tonight.
Okay, thank you, guys. Next item.
Thank you. I'm assuming several people will be leaving.
Well,
If they want to hang around, but I'll go ahead.
go ahead.
Okay, great. The next one's another investigation report where we had several alerts related to the Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools. There were 6 different issues. All those issues were unsubstantiated. You had a copy of the reports. They related to the impropriety of cash handling at the Bridgestone maintenance facility at, which high school is that one at? I got it here, but Maplewood, to management personnel going to a faith-based conference paid for by Metro Nashville Public Schools, to salon care gift certificates being handled out, and several other items. But all those were from our initial review, they did have some substance to them that needed investigating. We investigated and believed that it was really more of a communication issue and that they were all within the policy of the Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools. And if you got any questions, I can answer those. Or Innocent can answer them.
Just one?
Just one.
Does anybody else have a question before Innocent will do that?
At the end of the report, there's some recommendations. Do you know that the recommendations are being accepted?
I do not at this point, but we will ask for a response from the schools.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next item.
The next item should be, we did receive a request from the governance board of the Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools. That new business. Related to having supplemental audit assurance services dedicated for the Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools, targeting for the next fiscal year in the budgeting process. However, they would like to have that governance over that, at least proposal right now is potentially for 2 resources dedicated just of audit assurance services, FTEs, for the Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools that would be, I guess, an MOU with the school board and the audit committee on how to process going forward, and that those 2 individuals will report to the Metropolitan Auditor and will follow all the standards of the Metropolitan Auditor's Office going forward. So this is just a preliminary discussion. If that's something that you consider that might be feasible, we can continue to work with the school board's governance committee and coming up with a draft MOU on how that would work. The biggest issue I could see is that the audit committee is responsible for the annual audit plan. So it would be some MOU on how that would work, where they would we would work with them on coming up with a recommended audit plan for each year that would just go along with the other audit plan. But ultimately, it would be up to this audit committee to approve that audit plan to get all the protections that come along with that.
Don't they have an internal audit section?
They have an internal audit section.
How have they envisioned this working with that internal audit group?
My understanding that would not. Their internal audit section primarily just does the activity funds for the different schools. They have like, how many, 300, 500 activity funds? There's a lot of activity funds.
Yeah, they do the activity funds. They really don't do anything within the
schools.
The system itself.
And they report, they're not independent, they report through the finance section of the the schools, so they're not reporting to the school board directly. So, I mean, they could change some of that, and that might be what they work on, but right now that's the proposal that's up there. So I guess what I'm asking, if that's something that this committee would entertain, then I would continue working out the details.
What are your thoughts?
Well, first, I tried to highlight, it's not like we have not audited the schools in the past, but it's considered, and that's what I had on page 26 and 24 and kind of grayed out. About every 2 years we're doing an audit of the schools. We did the big comprehensive school audit back in 2015 that covered 12 different areas at that time. I tried to show the little pie chart kind of showing our total resources. Assurance resources has only been about 10% of the total effort since the independent auditor's office has been there. And I guess their reflection on that is saying, well, it still represents half of the budget, that maybe more resources need to be done on that. And they believe there's enough there to help them improve and stay on just having that well, there is that fear factor. I don't want to say fear factor, but assurance that someone's looking and making sure that their policies and procedures are being followed, that they can get an early warning system so that they know when things are going wrong early on before waiting for it to explode afterwards. So that's, I think, it's their goals behind it. We've had audits where we've just gone and announced an audit, then people have came in and confessed that they are taking money the next day. So,
well, I think when you start determining your audit schedule, you go through various.
We go. It would just mean that there'd be a more.
You would, to me, you would just add this to this process,
and see that there's 2 years worth of effort and the idea to have two people that would be more dedicated to the schools, education is another industry, having more expertise in that industry that would be more dedicated for a period of time to those
IT and other things.
Yes,
but it's all driven by the need for the audit.
Right.
The risk.
Right. Exactly. There'd be the same process, more digging down deeper into this. Right now, our risk assessment says Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools, $1 billion. And that's as far as it goes.
Who would prioritize your work in that situation? In terms of
Well, that's what the MOU did.
Is it still this committee, or is it the school board?
Well, I'm going to say the school board would be making a recommendation to you for your concurrence, and then that's what we'd have to work with is when you have a difference of opinion, how that would work out.
Okay. I guess we need to see the next steps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of you continuing to explore it.
Okay.
Okay.
Old business. We still have an annual assessment of the bylaws for the committee bylaws and the Office of Internal Audit bylaws. And it's really, I have no recommendations for changes, so it's just a matter of your approval. Anything else has a recommendation for changes.
Yeah, I mean, everybody know what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. I think they were last approved last summer.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
And then the other items, you had action items from the last audit committee was the hospital credit card missing documentation, and they've gone through and found receipts, still missing about half of the missing ones, but it adds up to about $7,200 to $9,200 on the audit sample, so 78% of the dollar value of the credit cards. They were able to get support, but when you read the support, you at least have an invoice. We haven't really gone through all the invoices yet. We just got them like a day ago. And they've also instituted a form going forward that they will know what the business purpose is, the government purpose, and the receipts going for an approval process for credit card purchases going forward. So I wanted to make sure that they are addressing your request. And then, any questions?
I mean, I'm glad they found more documentation, but I went back and looked at the minutes that we approved earlier, and they were going to conduct an analysis to ascertain if the expenses appear reasonable based on prior expense periods. and that's what the minutes say, that's what we agreed
No,
at the
I-
last meeting. And I don't think that's what they did.
Well, we haven't finally, because you requested for them to have an amended response, and so, to the report.
Well,
And so this is what I have so far.
The minutes we approved
Yeah,
say
right.
that they would conduct an analysis to ascertain if the expenses appear reasonable based on prior expense periods. And, I mean, I'm, again, happy to hear what everybody else thinks, but that's what we asked them to do, and I don't think they've done that yet.
Okay, well, and we'll continue working with them.
Still
It took since then to get this.
Okay.
Okay. And then the other one was for the investigation report for the Mayor Megan-Barry's travel and dignitary security detail extra time expense investigation. You asked for a corrective action plan for our recommendations, and that was sent to you earlier, a revised report, and I'll just let you know that was accomplished.
I've got one question about that one, too. I was glad to see this one on finding, or I guess recommendation C2. The recommendation was provide the Metropolitan Nashville Council an annual report listing all in-state and out-of-state travel by the mayor related to official duties. This report should list the accompanying employees and the funding source for the travel. And it says except, but as I read the detail there, that's not actually, it doesn't address the recommendation.
It sounds like the intent is to provide that as a supplement to the financial disclosure to the clerk's office.
Oh, so you interpret that as they'll add information to the disclosure?
Right. To the mayor's disclosure. You'll go beyond the minimum required.
Okay, thank you.
So just to
But it
follow,
doesn't go to the council. You'd have to make a request for it.
right, so to follow up, it's not, I'm looking at this language on, the Code of Law, Section 2.222.030 requires the filing of the document, but this would be added report. It's not a requirement of that language at this point.
Right.
Right.
So we could change it and make it a part of that. All right. Now, the other question is, I think you're right, that it gets filed with the clerk's office. It doesn't get filed with the Metro Council. That would be, I guess that's inconsistent with the recommendation.
So if interested council members wanted to change the code, that would be a way to address it.
So the code permits official out-of-state duties? I mean, I'm sitting here being hard-pressed to know what
That
would be.
happens.
Yeah.
Well, what would an official?
Economic development and
Police.
bond agencies, bonding agencies. They like to have the mayor there along with the finance folks. Those are the two things that come off the top of my head.
Fairly carefully defined
Yeah.
also.
Chamber of Commerce trips.
Again, one last question. Again, this is on A2. This is the recommendation, monitor top 5 employees' discretionary extra time in addition to monitoring report appearance extra time. The monitoring is done by the police department?
Police department, yes. When this was going, the police department was monitoring their budgets by the individual divisions, budget versus actual as a whole, and they had several years earlier had looked at their top 5 for court time appearances and had targeted that and had reduced the court time appearance through by managing and focusing on that by a substantial amount of money, but they weren't looking at individuals as a whole, who those top 5, not outside of court time.
And is there a duty to report to anyone? Is there anything that happens with this?
There's no duty. It's just helping them to be aware that people who's got the most time and is it justified. It's really more of a control to say, is there
Internal control.
Yeah, internal control saying, I know that X security details in the top 2, and we know Mr. Gish, who's the forensics investigator who has all kinds of overtime, that those are my top 2 people and I know there's a purpose for them to be having this much overtime. If you had someone that popped up that was down lower, that you had no idea why they would have that much overtime, at least you could follow up and start figuring out why.
Okay, anything else? Okay, committee members, have any questions about the audit status? And so you know,
I think we've covered all that.
okay. Fraud and fraudulation and abuse, anything?
That's on the audit status there, the number of items covered.
And any questions on other administrative matters that's provided to you? Okay. With that,
There's one item we need to discuss, is the next audit committee meeting. If you wish to continue to have it on December 10th, I know there were some members who were concerned about the date that we had for.
The 10th or the 11th?
It's the 11th.
December 11th, yeah. I'm sorry.
Is there,
that was because of the external audit, right?
Right, that was the release of the.
That's time sensitive, so what are the
Yeah.
dates?
We thought we could push it back afterwards.
Could we
Would be
do it the next week? I mean, I could be here, it would help to be in the next week for me, but if not, I can be here.
the
Push it to.
18th is a council meeting,
You know, you don't want to go into
17th is the
next week.
12th.
So the 11th, you have a
4 o'clock.
potential conflict?
I'm at a conference, but it's here. I'll just leave it, I'll leave it and come to the meeting.
Anybody else have a?
Well, I have sort of a conflict on the 11th also. Another day would be slightly better, but
Probably 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th.
so it's the 12th.
That's not good. Okay, well, why don't we try to keep it on the 11th?
Okay.
Then we'll reschedule if we can't get a quorum. Okay.
It's fine, I can be here.
I'd rather start moving after that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Terry, legal, how we do this executive session?
You need a motion to close the public meeting.
Is there a motion to close the public meeting?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Okay.
There also needs to be a motion to go into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Isn't that cool?
I almost said something.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.